One thing that's often overlooked that I don't hear many people talking about when we're talking about self-storage are the ADA requirements. Yes, ADA requirements are applicable in self-storage. Let's talk about self-storage and ADA. Hello, my name is Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Self-Storage Quick Start Academy. And what I do is I support small investors who want to get in the self-storage business or who want to grow their self-storage business, strategically do so in a way that creates true wealth and a fulfilling career. You can find out more about the services that I offer, both free and paid for, at creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. And I never really thought about it much before I got involved in expanding and building self-storage, but there are ADA requirements for self-storage. Now, I've heard stories about people or groups that will target the self-storage industry looking for facilities that are not ADA compliant and then filing lawsuits, and you've got to negotiate with them to settle the suit. I've never experienced that, but I learned about it early on, and we have been really focused on ADA requirements on all of our facilities, fulfilling the state and federal requirements. If you're not a member of the Self-Storage Association, this is a very good reason to be a member. In fact, you can go to episode 188. There's a link to click and join the Self-Storage Association. And the first thing you should do is go to the legal network and download the white paper that the SSA attorneys have put together. Every time we do a development, we pull that white paper out and look at it. Every time we do an expansion, we pull that white paper out and look at it. And basically, to be ADA compliant, there's a couple of steps. First of all, a certain number of units, we'll talk about in a second, have to be accessible. What that means is that there's no barrier into the unit. Very often, self-storage facilities have a lip. It's the concrete pads are designed to have a lip to keep the water out. Well, that lip is also a barrier for wheelchairs. So a certain percentage of the units have to be flat where a wheelchair can roll directly into it. And then the second piece is the opening of the door. There's a different latch and way to open the door that needs to be done from a wheelchair. Now, these are not expensive fixes, and these are not expensive things to create. But if you don't have them, you could really be opening yourself up to a lot of liability. Every time we have done an expansion, we have always included the percentage of ADA units that we need. Now, according to the Self-Storage Association attorneys' white papers, if you have a facility that has 200 units or less, 5% of your units need to be ADA accessible, but not less than one. So you've got to have at least one unit or 5% of your units, 200 units and below. For 200 units and up, or 201 units and up, the requirement is to have a minimum of 10, but everything over 200 units, 2% of those. So 10 units minimum plus 2% of everything over 200 units are to be ADA accessible. And typically what that looks like is no lip, a slope up, and the latch is a little different latch. It's lower, and there's usually a string, and all of the major door suppliers, all of the major fabricators, and all of the major parts distributors for doors in the self-storage industry have ADA kits. Now, in the construction phase, usually what that looks like is we'll take one building or part of one building, and the fabricators in most cases will design the concrete specs that the concrete company who's pouring the concrete pad we'll use. But what they do typically is, for that building or that portion of the building, they don't put the 2x4 down and there's no lip. What they do is they hand grade it so that it is a gradual slope up into the unit with no barrier in the way. The good news is, at least in our case so far, the fabricators that we buy our systems from and create the specs for the concrete floor are very familiar with ADA and make sure to include it. We go over it with them, but we're sure to include that. And to a novice, what it looks like is that the latch is a little lower to the ground than most doors, and then there's a longer cord that you can open and close the door with from a seated position. You do that, you'll be ADA compliant. However, I learned a lesson the hard way. Also, check with the local and state in which you're doing the expansion or pulling the building permit. We were doing an expansion in a state we'd never been in. We designed our new expansion building to have the ADA requirements. When we went to pull the permit, we learned that, well, in this locality, what we have to do is have automatic door openers open the doors, like a garage door opener. There's a couple ways that can be done, but the lesson is, make sure that you also check with the state and the local municipalities, and don't just assume that everyone's following the federal ADA guidelines. Not a big deal, but it set us back about a week. We had to go back, redesign the paperwork, then resubmit it again. It may sound like a pain, but think about it. Tomorrow, it could be you that needs the ADA access. Perhaps some of your family members need ADA access. Remember, our job is to provide a product and service to fulfill a need, and a certain percentage of our customers have a need to be able to more easily access a unit. We're in that business of fulfilling those needs. And remember, it's easier and less costly to do it in the design phase rather than come back and retrofit units. So just make sure that when you're laying out your expansion, or you're doing your value add play, or you're looking at acquiring a self-storage facility, that you take into account the ADA and don't overlook it. Well, good luck on your self-storage project, and good luck on getting in this fantastic business and growing this fantastic business of self-storage. No other business like it. So I look forward to being with you again next week. My name's Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage. Thanks. I look forward to being with you again soon.